The music in the Orange County biker bar didn't stop because the cops walked in. It stopped because a 5-year-old girl in a torn summer dress, barefoot and blue, lipped from cold, walked up to Joey, the Anvil Russo, president of the Hells Angels, tugged his leather vest with trembling hands, and whispered 7 words that would make 30 combat veterans grab their keys and ride into the California night. What happened next was caught on camera by 7 neighbors, went viral, 20 million views in 48 hours, and the rest would bring you to chills. Before we dive into this story, tell me, where are you watching this from right now? Drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this message travels across America. And if you believe that real heroes don't always wear badges, hit that subscribe button. I am curious to find out how this all played out. Now, let's get in. The Iron Piston didn't look like the kind of place that saved lives. It looked like the kind of place where careers went to die, and bad decisions were born over warm beer and cold regrets. Tucked between a pawn shop and an auto body garage on the industrial edge of Orange County, the bar squatted under a flickering neon sign that hadn't spelled out the full name in 3 years. Now it just read, Ron Python, in angry red letters that buzzed like a dying wasp. The windows were blacked out, the door was steel, and the parking lot was filled with 30 Harleys lined up in perfect formation, like soldiers waiting for orders. Inside, the air was thick with cigarette smoke, stale beer, and the kind of laughter that came from men who'd stopped caring what the world thought of them a long time ago. Lynyrd Skynyrd played on the jukebox, Simple Man, the song every biker knew by heart. Pool balls cracked, glasses clinked, voices rose and fell in the rhythm of Friday night brotherhood. Joey the Anvil Russo sat at the bar like a king on a throne, made of leather and bad reputation. 6'4", 260 pounds of muscle, scar tissue, and stories nobody asked about twice. His beard was grey-streaked and wild. His arms were covered in ink skulls, eagles, the Marine Corps emblem over his heart, and the Hells Angels' death head on his right shoulder. His vest, his colors in biker speak, was black leather worn soft by years of California highways, covered in patches that told anyone who knew how to read them exactly who they were dealing with. President across his back in bold letters, Hells Angels Orange County beneath it. And on his chest, over his heart, USMC Fallujah 2004. He was 48 years old, former Marine Corps infantry. 2 tours in Iraq where he'd learned that the world was crueler than most Americans could imagine, and that sometimes violence was the only language evil understood. He'd come home with a purple heart, nightmares that never quite left, and a bone-deep understanding that the law didn't always protect the innocent. So he'd found the Hells Angels, and in that brotherhood, he'd found purpose. Tonight, he was nursing his 3rd whiskey and listening to Tank, his VP, 6'6", former Marine Scout sniper, built like a refrigerator with fists, argue with wrench about whether a 1,972 panhead could outrun a modern street glide. Vintage don't mean faster, Wrench insisted, his Army Ranger tattoo visible under rolled-up sleeves. It means you're riding nostalgia with bad shocks. Vintage means soul, Tank shot back. Something your metric piece of. The door opened. Nobody looked up at first. Doors opened all the time. Bikers came and went. That's what bars did. But then the cold hit. California winters weren't brutal like Wyoming or Maine, but January nights in Orange County could drop into the low 40s, and when you'd been drinking in a warm bar for 3 hours, that cold cut like a knife. The music didn't stop because someone opened the door. It stopped because of who walked through it. A child. 5 years old, maybe younger, blonde hair matted and tangled, wearing a thin cotton dress, light blue, the kind meant for summer days at the park, not winter nights in industrial neighborhoods. No jacket, no shoes, just bare feet that were dirty and red from walking on cold concrete. And clutched in her small arms, held like a lifeline, was a teddy bear, brown, missing one eye. worn so threadbare the stuffing showed through holes in the fabric. The entire bar went silent. Lynyrd Skynyrd kept playing for 3 more seconds before someone hit the jukebox power. The sudden absence of sound was deafening. 30 bikers men who'd survived firefights, bar brawls, prison yards, and war zones stared at this child like she'd materialized out of thin air. She stood in the doorway, shivering so hard her teeth chattered, her lips were tinged blue, her face was pale, tear-streaked, eyes wide with the kind of terror that said she'd been through something no child should survive. But she didn't run, didn't scream, didn't collapse. She walked forward, straight toward Joey. Her bare feet made soft padding sounds on the beer-stained concrete floor. Every step was deliberate, like she'd made a decision, and nothing, not fear, not cold, not common sense, was going to stop her. Joey set down his whiskey slowly, every instinct from Fallujah kicking in the awareness of wrong, of danger, of something broken entering his space. The little girl stopped in front of him, looked up. Her eyes were grey-blue, the color of California winter sky, and filled with a desperation that made Joey's chest tighten. Then she reached out with one tiny hand and tugged on his leather vest. "Mister?" Her voice was small, hoarse, like she'd been crying for hours. "Are you the boss?" Joey glanced at Tank, who'd gone stone still, at Wrench, whose jaw had tightened, at Chains, who'd dropped his pool cue and moved closer, protective instinct overriding everything else. Joey looked back at the child and did what he'd learned to do in Iraq. When civilians approached, he made himself smaller, less threatening. He shifted off his bar stool and knelt on one knee, putting himself at her eye level. "Yeah, sweetheart," Joey said, voice gentler than most people knew he was capable of. "I'm the boss. What's your name?" "Courtney." She swallowed hard, holding the teddy bear tighter. "I need help." "Okay, where are your parents?" Her lip trembled. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "Mommy's outside. At home." Brad locked her out. The temperature in the room dropped another 10 degrees, but it had nothing to do with the open door. "Who's Brad?" Joey asked, though he already knew the answer would make him want to break something. "My stepdad." Courtney's voice cracked. "He got mad at Mommy. He said she needed to learn a lesson, so he pushed her outside and locked the door. She's been out there for hours. It's cold, really cold, and I can hear her crying, but I can't open the door because he locked it," and her words dissolved into sobs. Joey's hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles went white. Behind him, he heard Tank's breathing change, the slow, controlled exhale of a man forcing himself not to explode. Heard Wrench curse under his breath. Heard Chains crack his knuckles with the sound of bones preparing for violence. "Courtney," Joey said, voice steady despite the fury building in his chest like a wildfire. "How did you get here?" "I climbed out my window. Walked. I don't know how long. Maybe an hour? Maybe more?" She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Brad says bikers are bad guys. Says they hurt people. So I thought..." Her voice broke again. "I thought if you're bad guys, maybe you'd hurt Brad. Maybe you'd make him let Mommy inside." Joey felt something crack in his chest, not breaking, but opening. This child had walked through Orange County at night, alone, barefoot, freezing, to find the scariest people she could think of because she believed scary was the only language that would save her mother. He reached out slowly and placed one massive, scarred hand on her small shoulder. "Courtney, we're not bad guys, but you're right about one thing. We're going to make sure your mom is safe. Can you tell me where you live?" She rattled off an address, a suburb 15 minutes away. The kind of neighborhood with HOAs and minivans and people who called the cops on loud motorcycles. Joey stood and turned to face his brothers. The look on his face needed no words. Tank, Wrench, Chains, Doc, Preacher. His voice carried command, the same tone he'd used in Fallujah when ordering Marines into combat. "Mount up. We ride now." "How many?" Tank asked. "Everyone." 30 bikers moved as one, grabbing vests, draining drinks, heading for the door. Lisa, Tank's wife and one of the few women who spent time at the bar, appeared from the back room and knelt beside Courtney. "Come here, baby. Let's get you warm." She wrapped the child in her own jacket, holding her close, while Joey walked to the door and looked at his brotherhood men who'd served in Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, men who'd come home broken and found family in chrome and leather. "There's a woman locked outside in 40-degree weather by a man who thinks he can hurt her because nobody's watching." Joey's voice was cold, lethal. "Tonight, somebody's watching. And that somebody is us." 30 engines roared to life in perfect unison, a thunder that shook windows and rattled the iron piston's dying neon sign. And the Hells Angels of Orange County rode into the California night with one mission: rescue Patricia, and make damn sure Brad never hurt anyone again. The sound hit the quiet Orange County suburb like a declaration of war. 30 Harley-Davidsons roaring through streets where the loudest noise was usually a lawnmower on Saturday morning. House lights flickered on, curtains pulled back, faces appeared in windows, confused, alarmed, some reaching for phones to call 911. But the Hells Angels weren't stopping, they were hunting. Joey led the formation with tank and wrench flanking, headlights cutting through the California winter darkness like searchlights hunting prey. The address Courtney had given them was burned into Joey's mind. 2847 Maple Grove Lane, a cul-de-sac, middle class. The kind of place where people barbecued on Sundays and pretended everything was fine even when it wasn't. They turned onto Maple Grove and immediately spotted it, a 2-story house, lights on inside, a silver SUV in the driveway with a "Proud American Dad" bumper sticker that made Joey want to rip it off with his bare hands. The bikes filled the street, engines idling, a wall of chrome and leather and barely contained fury. Joey dismounted first, walked toward the house with the kind of purpose that came from leading Marines through Fallujah doorways where insurgents waited. But before he reached the front door, Tank grabbed his arm and pointed toward the side yard. A wooden fence, 6 feet tall, privacy fence, the kind that kept neighbors from seeing what you didn't want them to see. And from behind that fence came a sound that made every biker's blood run cold. A woman sobbing, not crying, sobbing, the desperate, broken sound of someone who'd given up hope. Joey didn't hesitate. He grabbed the top of the fence and vaulted over in one smooth motion, tank and chains right behind him. What they found in that backyard would haunt them for years. Patricia huddled against the back patio door, wearing nothing but a thin nightgown, barefoot, her skin blue, tinged from hours in 40-degree weather. Her hands were pressed against the glass, trying desperately to get back inside. Her face was tear-streaked, lips cracked and bleeding from the cold. She'd stopped banging, stopped screaming. She was just waiting to die. Joey's voice came out, lethal calm. "Ma'am?" Patricia's head snapped up, eyes wide with terror then confusion. 3 massive bikers had just appeared in her backyard, like guardian angels wearing leather and rage. "We're here to help," Joey said, already shrugging off his vest and wrapping it around her shoulders. "Courtney sent us." At her daughter's name, Patricia broke. "Is she okay? Please tell me she's okay. She's safe, with Lisa at our bar, warm, fed, protected." Joey lifted Patricia like she weighed nothing, muscle memory from carrying wounded Marines. "But you and I need to have a conversation about the man inside that house." Patricia's entire body started shaking, not from cold now, but from something darker. Fear, shame, the complex emotions of abuse, victims who'd learned that asking for help only made things worse. "He'll kill me if I—" "No," Tank interrupted, his voice carrying the finality of a man who'd made a promise. "He won't, because we're not leaving until this is handled." Through the glass door, they could see movement inside. A man, 30s, button-down shirt, khakis, the kind of guy who coached Little League and hid monsters behind smiles. Brad had heard the bikes and was staring out the window, phone in hand, probably calling the police to report a biker gang invading his property. Joey smiled, the kind of smile that meant someone was about to learn a very hard lesson. Tank, get Patricia to doc, wrap her up, warm fluids, medical check. Then Joey walked to the back door and knocked. Not pounded, not kicked, knocked, like a neighbor borrowing sugar. And when Brad opened that door, Joey stepped inside, uninvited, and said 5 words that would change everything. "We need to talk about Courtney." Brad's face went through a fascinating series of expressions in 3 seconds. Confusion, recognition, fear. Then, and this was what made Joey's blood boil, anger. The audacity of an abuser caught in the act, but still believing he was the victim. "You can't just barge into my home," Brad sputtered, trying to position himself between Joey and the interior of the house like he had something to hide. Which of course he did. Joey didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, 6'4" of Marine Corps discipline wrapped in leather and judgment, letting the silence do the work. Behind him, through the open door, he could hear Doc's voice, calm, professional, treating Patricia for hypothermia with the same efficiency he'd used treating gunshot wounds in Baghdad. In the street beyond, 30 engines idled. A reminder. Brad tried again. "I don't know who you think you are, but my stepdaughter had no business going to—" "Your stepdaughter," Joey interrupted, voice quiet but carrying enough edge to cut steel. "Walked 2 miles barefoot through Orange County at night because you locked her mother outside to freeze. A 5-year-old child thought bikers were safer than you. Let that sink in." Brad's jaw worked. Patricia was drunk. She was hysterical. I was trying to help her calm down by locking her outside in 40-degree weather for 3 hours. Tank's voice came from the doorway, massive frame blocking any escape. That's an interesting definition of help. The living room was exactly what Joey expected. Clean, organized, photos on the wall of Brad and Patricia and Courtney at Disneyland. All smiles, the perfect blended family. The American dream with a monster hiding in plain sight. That's how it always worked. Abusers didn't look like villains. They looked like neighbors, coaches, church volunteers, people you'd never suspect until it was too late. Joey took 1 step further into the house, his boots heavy on the hardwood floor. "Here's what's going to happen, Brad. You're going to stand there. You're not going to call the police, because if you do, I've got 30 witnesses who saw a woman locked outside freezing and a child who walked miles for help. You think that plays well for you?" Brad's face flushed red. "You're threatening me in my own home." "I'm not threatening anything," Joey said. "I'm explaining reality." Outside, more movement. Neighbors had started gathering, not just peeking through curtains anymore, actually coming outside, drawn by the wall of motorcycles and the commotion. Joey could see them through the front window. An elderly couple, a young woman with her phone out, recording, a teenage boy standing with his arms crossed, watching everything. Good. Let them watch. Brad saw them too. His expression shifted, panic creeping in around the edges of his anger. "You're making a scene," Brad hissed. "The whole neighborhood can see." "I know," Joey said. "That's the point." Because Joey had learned something in Iraq that most civilians never understood. Sunlight killed monsters better than violence ever could. You didn't need to beat a man like Brad. You just needed to expose him. Let everyone see who he really was. Strip away the mask. And in the age of smartphones and social media, exposure was deadlier than any weapon. Chains appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "Patricia's stable. Says this isn't the first time he's locked her out. Says he does it whenever she disrespects him." The air in the room changed. Brad tried to speak, but Joey held up one scarred hand. "Don't. Every word you say right now is digging you deeper." Outside, the woman with the phone had moved closer, clearly recording through the front window now. The teenage boy had pulled out his phone too. Even the elderly couple was watching, the wife gripping her husband's arm. This was going viral. Joey could feel it, and that was exactly what needed to happen. Because in 30 years of living in that suburb, those neighbors had probably heard things, seen things, suspected things. But like most Americans, they'd told themselves it wasn't their business, that calling the police was too dramatic, that surely if it was really bad, someone else would do something. Tonight, someone had. 30 someones on motorcycles. And now those neighbors were witnessing what happened when good people finally stopped looking away. Joey leaned close to Brad, voice dropping to a whisper only the two of them could hear. You locked a woman outside to freeze. You terrorized a 5-year-old so badly she sought help from strangers. You hid behind suburban respectability while hurting people who couldn't fight back. That ends tonight. Brad's hands trembled. What are you going to do? Joey smiled. Nothing. I'm just going to stand here while America watches. The Orange County Sheriff's cruiser arrived 11 minutes after the first neighbor called 911. Officer Maria Ramirez stepped out, 15-year veteran, seen enough domestic disturbances to know the difference between noise complaints and real danger, and immediately assessed the situation with practiced efficiency. 30 motorcycles. One terrified-looking man in khakis. A woman wrapped in a biker's leather vest, being treated by what appeared to be a field medic. And at least 7 neighbors filming everything on their phones. Ramirez approached Joey with her hand near her weapon, but not on it. Professional, cautious, not looking for a fight, but ready for one. I'm Officer Ramirez. Someone want to explain what's happening here? Joey nodded toward Patricia, who sat on the back of Doc's bike, wrapped in blankets, drinking something hot from a thermos. 5-year-old girl walked into our bar tonight. Told us her stepdad locked her mom outside in the cold. We came to verify. Found that woman hypothermic in the backyard after being locked out for 3 hours. Ramirez's expression tightened. She walked over to Patricia, knelt down, spoke quietly. Joey couldn't hear the conversation, but he saw Patricia nod, saw her point toward Brad, saw her pull back the blanket to show her arms and the bruises that weeks of long sleeves had hidden from neighbors. Old bruises, new bruises. The map of abuse written on skin that had learned to expect pain. When Ramirez stood and walked back, her jaw was set. Mr. Morrison, she called to Brad, using his last name with the kind of formal distance cops used when they'd already decided you were guilty. I need you to step outside, please. Brad's lawyer voice activated the tone of a man who'd talked his way out of things before. Officer, these men broke into my property. They're trespassing. I want them arrested for... I said step outside. Ramirez's voice carried command. Now. Brad complied, but his face had gone from red to white. He knew. Joey could see it, the calculation happening behind his eyes, the realization that his carefully constructed suburban mask was cracking. In the street, more phones appeared. A woman Joey recognized from local news, Kim Chen, Action 7 reporter, had arrived with a camera crew. The story was getting bigger. The teenage boy who'd been filming suddenly spoke up. Officer, I've got video of him locking her out, from 2 weeks ago. Every head turned. The kid held up his phone, face flushed but determined. I heard screaming, started recording from my window. I've got 10 minutes of him yelling at her through the door while she begged to come inside. Ramirez took the phone, watched. Her expression went from professional neutral to barely controlled rage. How long have you had this? 2 weeks. I didn't know what to do. My parents said it wasn't our business, but I kept it, just in case, just in case. Joey felt something twist in his chest, pride mixed with anger. This kid had evidence that could have helped, but lived in a culture that said mind your own business. That said don't get involved. That said surely someone else will handle it. And so Patricia had kept suffering, until a 5-year-old girl decided she wouldn't. Ramirez handed the phone to her partner who'd just arrived. Upload this to evidence. I want it logged. Then she turned to Brad. Morrison, turn around. Hands behind your back. Brad's facade finally cracked. This is insane. You're arresting me because of bikers? Because some kid took a video out of context? I'm arresting you for domestic abuse, false imprisonment, and child endangerment. You have the right to remain silent. The handcuffs clicked shut. The neighbors watched. The cameras recorded. And Joey, The Anvil Russo, president of the Hells Angels Orange County, stood silent in the background, letting justice run its course. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a biker could do wasn't violence, it was bearing witness, being present when the system finally did its job. As Brad was loaded into the cruiser, still protesting his innocence, Kim Chen approached Joey with her microphone. "Sir, can you tell us what happened here tonight?" Joey looked at the camera, at the lens that would carry this story to living rooms across America. And he spoke not as a biker, not as a Marine, but as a father. "A little girl asked for help. We helped. That's it. Simple. True. Devastating." The teenager with the video walked over, hands shaking. "I should have done something sooner. I'm sorry." Tank placed a massive hand on the kid's shoulder. "You did something tonight. That matters." Within 20 minutes, the street began to clear. Brad was gone. Patricia was being taken to the hospital for evaluation, and the Hells Angels prepared to ride back to the Iron Piston, where Courtney waited, not knowing yet that her nightmare was finally over. But Joey knew something else was just beginning, because Kim Chen's camera crew had already uploaded footage, and in the digital age, truth traveled fast. The video hit social media at 11:47 p.m. By midnight, it had 10,000 views. By 1 a.m., 100,000. By dawn, 5 million. The headline wrote itself, "Hells Angels rescue woman locked outside by abusive husband, neighbors filmed everything." America woke up to a story that challenged everything they thought they knew about bikers. The footage showed it all: the wall of motorcycles arriving, Joey vaulting the fence, Patricia being wrapped in a vest, the teenager's confession about having evidence for weeks, and Brad being arrested while still insisting he was the victim. The comment section exploded. Some called the bikers heroes. Others insisted they'd overstepped, that civilians shouldn't take the law into their own hands. But the vast majority focused on one devastating detail. A 5-year-old had to walk miles at night to find help because the adults around her had failed. Back at the Iron Piston, as sunrise painted Orange County in shades of orange and gold, Courtney sat wrapped in Lisa's arms, eating pancakes Doc had made in the tiny kitchen they usually only used for reheating pizza. She'd slept for 3 hours on a couch in the back room, surrounded by biker wives who'd taken turns keeping watch, and had woken asking one question: "Is Mommy okay?" Joey knelt beside her, same eye-level respect he'd shown from the beginning. "Your mum's at the hospital getting checked out, but she's safe, warm, and the man who hurt her is in jail." Courtney processed this with the gravity of someone much older than 5. "Because I told you? Because you were brave enough to ask for help when nobody else would." Her lower lip trembled. "I was scared. Brad said bikers hurt people." Joey smiled, gentle, genuine. "Some do. But most of us? We hurt people who hurt kids and moms. There's a difference. Are you going to keep Mommy safe forever?" Forever was a long time. Joey knew better than to make promises he couldn't keep, but he also knew what this child needed to hear. "Your mum's got 30 guardian angels now. Anytime she needs us, we're there. And that includes you." Courtney seemed to accept this. She returned to her pancakes while Lisa exchanged a look with Joey that said what they were both thinking. What happens next? Patricia couldn't go back to that house. Even with Brad in jail, the home was contaminated, filled with memories and terror. She'd need somewhere safe to rebuild. Somewhere Brad couldn't find her even after he posted bail, which, in America's broken system, he probably would within 48 hours. Tank approached with his phone. "Boss, we got a problem." Joey stood. "What kind?" "The good kind." Tank showed him the screen messages flooding the Hells Angels social media from across the country. Offers of help, donations, people wanting to contribute to Patricia and Courtney's relocation, lawyers offering pro bono services for the restraining order, therapists specializing in domestic abuse trauma offering free sessions, corporate sponsors wanting to partner with the club on domestic violence awareness. "How much money?" Joey asked. "Last count, $43,000, And climbing. Joey stared at the number. In less than 12 hours, America had watched a little girl get saved by bikers and decided to do something about it. Not just watch, not just comment, actually help. Set up a fund, Joey said. Transparent. Every dollar accounted for. Patricia gets to decide how it's spent. New place, therapy, legal fees, whatever she needs. Wrench appeared from the garage where he'd been monitoring news coverage. CNN just called. They want an interview. No. Joey. I said no, this isn't about us. It's about Patricia and Courtney. The second we start doing interviews, it becomes about Hell's Angels getting good PR instead of about domestic violence being exposed. Tank nodded slowly. Smart. Let the story tell itself. And the story was telling itself. Across America, people were having conversations they'd avoided for years, about the neighbor whose wife always wore long sleeves, about the coworker who flinched at loud noises, about the friend who'd stopped going out because her boyfriend said she was too friendly with strangers. The video had cracked open something bigger than one rescue. It had forced America to confront a truth most preferred to ignore. Domestic violence happened everywhere, in every neighborhood, behind every kind of door, and most of the time people looked away, until someone didn't. At 7:32 a.m., Patricia was released from the hospital with instructions to rest, stay warm, and follow up with her doctor. Ramirez drove her directly to the Iron Piston, where Courtney launched herself into her mother's arms with such force they almost fell over. "Mommy, the bikers saved you. They're like superheroes, but with motorcycles." Patricia held her daughter and cried not from pain this time, but from relief so profound it hurt. She looked up at Joey over Courtney's head, eyes shining. "Thank you. I don't know how to—" "You don't have to," Joey said. "Just focus on healing." But Patricia shook her head. "No, you need to understand. I'd given up. I thought I was going to die out there. And then these men I'd been taught my whole life to fear showed up and—" Her voice broke. Lisa stepped forward, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Come on, honey. Let's get you somewhere comfortable." As Patricia was led away, Tank stood beside Joey, watching the sunrise. "We're not done," Tank said quietly. "Brad makes bail. He's coming for her." Joey's expression hardened. "Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance." Brad Morrison posted bail 31 hours after his arrest. $50,000 put up by his parents, who'd driven from Arizona, insisting their son was innocent, that Patricia was dramatic, that this was all a misunderstanding, blown out of proportion by criminals on motorcycles. The judge set conditions. No contact with Patricia or Courtney. GPS, ankle monitor, surrender of passport. Brad walked out of Orange County Jail at 2:15 p.m., wearing the same khakis from his arrest and an expression that promised revenge. His lawyer, a man named Hutchins, who specialized in defending the indefensible, issued a statement to the press. "Mr. Morrison maintains his innocence and looks forward to his day in court where the truth will emerge. He's the victim of a coordinated attack by a motorcycle gang with a history of violence." The statement was strategic. Shift focus from Brad's actions to the Hells Angels' reputation. Make the story about biker intimidation instead of domestic abuse. It might have worked, except America had already seen the video, and they'd made up their minds. Brad returned to his house on Maple Grove to find it had been transformed. Someone, multiple someones, had spray-painted messages on his driveway. "Abuser, coward, lock him out." His windows were intact, but his lawn was covered in women's shoes, dozens of them, left by neighbors in silent protest. And parked across the street, engines idling, were 6 Harleys. Not blocking anything, not threatening anyone, just present, watching, making it very clear that Brad Morrison was never going to be unsupervised again. Brad called the police, complained about harassment. Officer Ramirez showed up, looked at the bikers sitting legally on a public street, doing nothing illegal, and told Brad there was nothing she could do. They're not breaking any laws, Mr. Morrison. They're simply exercising their right to exist in public space. They're intimidating me. Are they threatening you? Following you onto private property? Making verbal statements? No, but then they're not intimidating. They're observing, which, given your ankle monitor and court order, is probably in everyone's best interest. She left. The bikers stayed. That night, Brad posted on Facebook a long screed about how he was the real victim, how Patricia had mental health issues, how Courtney had been coached by bikers to lie. The post lasted 17 minutes before Facebook removed it for violating community standards. Twitter suspended his account after 3 tweets. His employer, a tech company in Irvine, placed him on administrative leave pending investigation. His church quietly asked him not to attend services. His gym revoked his membership. America was canceling Brad Morrison, and there wasn't a lawyer in California who could stop it. Meanwhile, Patricia and Courtney had disappeared. Not literally, they were staying in a safe house coordinated by a domestic violence non-profit that specialized in relocating abuse survivors, but as far as Brad or anyone else knew, they'd vanished. The Hells Angels had made sure of it. Joey had called in favors from brothers across California. Patricia's belongings had been moved out of the Maple Grove house in under 2 hours by 20 bikers who documented every item to prevent theft accusations. Her car had been driven to an undisclosed location. Her phone had been replaced with a new number Brad would never have. And Courtney had started counseling with a trauma specialist who worked specifically with children who'd witnessed domestic violence. The fund that had started at $43,000 had now reached $217,000, enough for Patricia to start over anywhere in America. Enough for therapy, legal fees, education, security. Enough to prove that sometimes going viral for the right reasons changed lives. But Brad wasn't done. 3 days after posting bail, he hired a private investigator to find Patricia. The PI lasted 6 hours before encountering Tank in a Starbucks parking lot. No threats were made. No violence occurred. Tank simply sat down at the PI's table, slid a folder across, and said, "This is your client's real history. Police reports he paid to keep sealed. Hospital visits from 3 previous relationships, restraining orders from 2 ex-girlfriends. You really want to help him find another victim?" The PI looked at the folder, looked at Tank, and quietly terminated his contract with Brad Morrison. By the end of the week, Brad was alone. His parents had returned to Arizona after seeing the evidence. His friends had stopped returning calls. His neighbors crossed the street to avoid him. And 6 bikers still parked across from his house every single day, rotations changing, but presence constant. America had rendered its verdict. Brad Morrison was guilty in the court of public opinion, and no amount of legal maneuvering would change it. But Joey knew something most people didn't. Men like Brad didn't accept loss. They retaliated, and when they did, the Hells Angels would be ready. The retaliation came on a Tuesday. Brad violated his restraining order at 11:34 p.m., drunk, desperate, and stupid enough to think he could get away with it. He'd figured out where Patricia and Courtney were staying, a duplex in Santa Ana, subsidized by the domestic violence non-profit, protected by security cameras and an alarm system linked directly to police dispatch. What Brad didn't know was that the Hells Angels had also stationed brothers on rotating watch 3 blocks away. When Brad's silver SUV turned onto Patricia's street, Chains saw it immediately. He radioed Joey. "We got movement. Morrison just parked 2 houses down from Patricia's location." Joey was at the Iron Piston, cleaning up after Tuesday night poker. His response was instant. "Don't engage. Call Ramirez. Let law enforcement handle it." "Copy." But Joey grabbed his keys anyway, because he'd learned in Fallujah that situations deteriorated fast, and backup was never a bad idea. Brad sat in his SUV for 11 minutes, working up courage or justification or whatever abusers tell themselves when they're about to make everything worse. Then he stepped out, walked to Patricia's door, and started pounding. "Patricia, I know you're in there. We need to talk." You can't just run away. I'm your husband." He wasn't. They'd never married. But abusers rewrote history to suit their narrative. Inside, Patricia heard the voice and froze. Courtney, asleep in the bedroom, woke up crying. The alarm system activated, sending alerts to police, the non-profit's emergency line, and because Joey had personally installed a backup notification directly to his phone. Brad kept pounding. "I'm not leaving until you talk to me. You owe me that, after everything I did for you." The security camera captured everything in high definition. Brad's face, his slurred speech, his violation of a court order that explicitly stated he was to have zero contact. 3 blocks away, Chains started his bike, not to confront, to observe, to be present as a deterrent, to make sure Brad saw witnesses. By the time Brad started trying the doorknob, 2 things happened simultaneously. Officer Ramirez's cruiser turned onto the street, lights flashing, and Joey's Harley appeared from the opposite direction, flanked by tank and wrench. Brad saw them and ran. Not back to his SUV toward the alley behind the duplex, the coward's escape route he'd probably planned from the beginning. He made it 30 feet before Ramirez's voice boomed from a loudspeaker. "Bradford Morrison, stop where you are. You're under arrest." He didn't stop. Tank and wrench cut off the alley on their bikes, headlights trapping Brad in a cone of light like a stage performer forced into a spotlight. Brad spun, wild-eyed, looking for escape. "This is harassment. You're all harassing me." Joey dismounted slowly, pulled out his phone, and held it up. "Recording. We're documenting a man violating a restraining order. That's called evidence." Ramirez approached with handcuffs. "Mr. Morrison, on the ground. Now." This time, there was no argument. Brad complied because he had no choice, because he was outnumbered, because America was watching again. As Ramirez cuffed him, she read his Miranda rights for the 2nd time in a week. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Brad was loaded into the cruiser. Joey walked to Patricia's door and knocked gently. "Patricia, it's Joey. He's gone. You're safe." The door opened. Patricia stood there, pale and shaking, Courtney clinging to her leg. "He found us. How did he? Doesn't matter. He's in custody. And this time, bail's gonna be a lot higher." Courtney looked up at Joey with eyes that had seen too much. "Are the bad guys gone forever now?" Joey knelt. "Sweetheart, sometimes bad guys keep trying. But that's okay, because good guys don't give up either." The next morning, Brad's 2nd arrest made headlines. "Abuser violates restraining order hours after posting bail court on camera by bikers." The judge who'd set the original bail was not pleased. At Brad's arraignment, she revoked bail entirely. "Mr. Morrison, you've demonstrated a clear disregard for court orders and a continued threat to the victim's safety. You'll remain in custody until trial." Brad's lawyer objected. The judge overruled, and Bradford Morrison was remanded to Orange County Jail, where he'd stay for the next 6 months, awaiting trial. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed. Joey gave his 2nd and final interview. "Domestic violence doesn't stop because someone gets arrested. It stops when we collectively decide that protecting victims matters more than protecting abusers' reputations." The reporter asked one more question. "What do you want people to take away from this?" Joey looked directly into the camera. "That little girl saved her mum by asking for help. The neighbors who finally filmed evidence saved her. The cop who believed her saved her. We were just the ones who showed up. But anybody could have shown up. That's the lesson. Stop looking away." 6 months later, Brad Morrison stood trial in Orange County Superior Court on charges of domestic abuse, false imprisonment, child endangerment, and violating a restraining order. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence: medical records, police reports, the teenager's video, Courtney's testimony delivered via closed-circuit television to protect her from seeing her abuser, and Patricia's own account delivered with a strength that made the jury cry. Brad's defense argued mental health issues, stress, misunderstandings. His lawyer painted Patricia as vindictive, Courtney as coached, the bikers as vigilantes who'd manipulated the narrative. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in state prison with mandatory counseling and a permanent restraining order. As Brad was led away, he turned and looked at Patricia one last time. She stared back without flinching, and in that moment, he understood. She'd won, not because of the verdict, but because she was free. Meanwhile, life had moved on for Patricia and Courtney in ways neither could have imagined 6 months earlier. The fund established by the Hells Angels had grown to over $400,000 after a celebrity domestic violence survivor amplified the story to her millions of followers. Patricia used it wisely. First, she relocated to San Diego, far enough from Orange County to feel safe, close enough to maintain her support network. She found a 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood where Courtney could walk to school without fear. She enrolled in online college courses to finish the degree she'd abandoned years ago when Brad had convinced her she wasn't smart enough. She started working part-time at a non-profit, helping other domestic violence survivors navigate the system because surviving meant nothing if she didn't help others do the same. And Courtney? Courtney thrived. Therapy helped her process the trauma. School helped her feel normal. And knowing that 30 bikers were always one phone call away helped her feel safe. The Hells Angels had become family in a way Patricia's own relatives who'd told her to work it out with Brad never could. On a Saturday in July, the Hells Angels Orange County chapter held their annual charity ride, a fundraiser for domestic violence organizations that had become one of the largest in Southern California. Over 200 bikes participated, riding from Santa Ana to San Diego, raising money and awareness. Patricia and Courtney waited at the finish line. When Joey pulled up on his Harley, Courtney ran to him with something clutched in her small hands. A drawing, crayon on construction paper. It showed a little girl standing in front of a massive biker, both surrounded by motorcycles. At the top, in careful 6-year-old handwriting, "My hero." Joey took it with hands that had held weapons and wounded soldiers, and now held art from a child who'd learned that scary-looking people could have the biggest hearts. "Thank you, sweetheart. Are you gonna keep it? I'm gonna frame it. Put it on the clubhouse wall where everyone can see." Patricia approached, and for the first time since Joey had met her, she looked genuinely happy. Healthy. The bruises were long gone. The fear had faded. She'd reclaimed herself. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You already did. By surviving, by testifying, by showing other women that leaving is possible." Patricia shook her head. "No, you showed me leaving is possible. Before that night, I'd convinced myself I deserved it, that nobody would believe me, that I had nowhere to go." She gestured at Courtney, who was now showing Tank her drawing. "She saved my life by finding you, but you saved both our lives by believing her." Joey remembered that night the little girl in the summer dress, shivering and desperate, asking the scariest men she could find to do something good people had refused to do. "She's braver than most Marines I served with. She learned it from you." They stood together watching the charity ride participants gather, watching families celebrate, watching America prove that sometimes collective action changes lives. The viral video had sparked a movement. Domestic violence hotline calls had spiked 40% in Orange County. Dozens of other survivors had come forward. 3 more abusers had been arrested. The teenager who'd filmed evidence had started a non-profit teaching young people how to recognize and report abuse. And the Hells Angels? They'd become unexpected advocates, partnering with organizations, speaking at schools, proving that brotherhood meant protecting the vulnerable. As the sun set over San Diego, painting the sky in colors that reminded Joey of both California beauty and Fallujah fire, Courtney tugged his vest one more time. "Mr. Joey." "Yeah, sweetheart. When I grow up, can I be a biker?" Joey laughed, genuine, surprised, delighted. "You can be anything you want. But if you do become a biker, remember the code: protect those who can't protect themselves. Like you protected me and Mommy? Exactly like that. Courtney nodded seriously. Then she hugged his leg and ran back to her mother. And Joey, the Anvil Russo Marine, biker, president, protector, watched them walk away into their new life and knew that sometimes the most important battles weren't fought with weapons. They were fought by showing up, by believing victims, by refusing to look away when everyone else did. America didn't need more warriors, it needed more witnesses. And that night at the Iron Piston, a 5-year-old girl with no shoes had taught 30 hardened veterans what true courage looked like. The drawing stayed on the clubhouse wall for years. A reminder, a promise, a testament to the fact that family isn't who you're born to, it's who fights for you when the world walks away. 2 years after that frozen California night, Joey received an invitation in the mail. Heavy cardstock, formal script. The kind of invitation that meant something important was happening. It was from Courtney, well, from Patricia on Courtney's behalf. But the message was clear. Courtney was graduating from 2nd grade, and she wanted Joey to be there. He brought 15 brothers, not because Courtney's elementary school could accommodate them, but because brotherhood meant celebrating victories together. They parked their bikes in the school lot, drawing stares from suburban parents who still weren't quite sure what to make of Hell's Angels at a children's event. But Principal Matthews, who'd read the viral story, who'd watched the video, who understood exactly who these men were, welcomed them personally. "Gentlemen, thank you for coming. Courtney talks about you constantly." The graduation ceremony was standard 2nd grade fare, wobbly singing, gap-toothed smiles, participation certificates for everyone. But when Courtney walked across that small gymnasium stage to receive her diploma, she paused, looked directly at Joey in the audience, and gave him the 2-finger salute, the biker salute, the promise. Joey returned it. Every parent in that gym saw it. Some understood, others whispered, but Patricia, sitting beside Joey, understood perfectly. "She practices that in the mirror," Patricia said quietly. "Says it means, I see you and I've got your back." That's exactly what it means. After the ceremony, during the reception in the cafeteria with juice boxes and store-bought cookies, parents approached Joey cautiously. A few thanked him. One woman admitted she'd been in an abusive relationship years ago and wished someone had shown up for her the way the angels had shown up for Patricia. Another said his daughter had seen the video and it had sparked conversations about healthy relationships that he didn't know how to start alone. But the most meaningful moment came from an unexpected source. The teenage boy, now 17, college-bound, still carrying guilt for not acting sooner, approached with his mother. "Mr. Russo, I'm David Martinez. I was the kid who had the video," Joey remembered. "You did good work, son. I wanted to do more, so I'm starting college this fall for social work. I want to help families before it gets to the point where kids have to walk miles in the dark." His mother gripped his shoulder, pride evident. "That video changed his life. Watching you all show up when adults had failed, it taught him something school never could." Joey shook David's hand. "The world needs more people like you, people who don't just watch, they act." As the reception wound down and families filtered out, Courtney found Joey near the parking lot, still in her little cap and gown, diploma clutched carefully. "Mr. Joey, I made you something." She handed him an envelope. Inside was another drawing, but this one was different, more sophisticated, clearly done with effort. It showed the Iron Piston bar, bikes parked outside, and a little girl walking through the door. Above it, in careful lettering, "The night everything changed." Below, a quote Joey recognized from his own words 2 years ago. "Sometimes the scariest-looking people have the biggest hearts." "Courtney, this is beautiful. Mommy helped with the words, but I drew it myself. I want you to keep it, so you remember that you saved us." Joey knelt down one more time, the way he always had, meeting her at eye level with the respect every child deserved. "Sweetheart, I need you to understand something. You saved yourself. You made the choice to walk through that door. You found courage when adults had failed you. We just answered the call. But what if nobody had been there? Someone would have been, because brave people attract help. The universe has a way of responding to courage. Courtney thought about this with the seriousness of a child who'd learned too young that life was complicated. "Mr. Joey, are you going to keep being a hero?" Joey smiled. "I'm going to keep showing up. That's all heroes do. They show up." She hugged him fierce, grateful, the kind of hug that said words weren't enough. Then she ran back to Patricia, who waved at Joey with tears in her eyes. The Hells Angels mounted their bikes. 15 engines roared to life in perfect unison, a sound that made parents jump but made Courtney grin. As they pulled out of the parking lot, Joey looked in his rearview mirror one last time. Courtney stood with her diploma, her mother's arm around her shoulders, both of them waving. Free, safe, alive. And Joey, the Anvil Russo, president of the Hells Angels, Orange County, former Marine, protector of the innocent, rode into the California afternoon knowing that sometimes the most important thing a warrior could do was be present when someone whispered for help. The viral video had faded from social media. The headlines had moved on. Brad Morrison was serving his sentence in Corcoran State Prison. But the impact remained. Hundreds of domestic violence survivors had found courage from watching Courtney's story. Thousands of bystanders had stopped looking away. And one motorcycle club had proven that brotherhood wasn't about leather and chrome. It was about showing up when the world said it was someone else's problem. Back at the Iron Piston that night, Joey hung Courtney's new drawing beside the original, creating a gallery of remembrance. Beside them, he placed a third item, a newspaper clipping from 2 months earlier about David Martinez receiving a full scholarship to study social work, specifically citing the viral video incident as his inspiration. Tank stood beside him, looking at the wall. "We changed lives, boss." "No," Joey corrected. "A 5-year-old girl changed lives. We just had the privilege of witnessing it." They stood in silence, two combat veterans who'd seen humanity at its worst and somehow still believed in its best, surrounded by brothers who'd chosen loyalty over law when law had failed. And somewhere in San Diego, a little girl slept peacefully, knowing that if nightmares ever came again, 30 guardian angels were always one phone call away. Because that's what Hells Angels meant in Orange County, not outlaws, not criminals, protectors, family, the people who showed up when everyone else looked away. And America had learned, through one viral video and one frozen California night, that sometimes the scariest-looking people have the biggest hearts. The end wasn't really an end, it was a beginning. For Courtney, for Patricia, for David, for every survivor who watched and found courage, for every bystander who decided looking away wasn't enough, the Iron Piston stayed open, the brotherhood stayed strong. And the promise remained, when someone whispers for help, the Hells Angels will always answer, always. The scariest-looking people can have the biggest hearts, and showing up when everyone else looks away is what real courage looks like. Like and share this story. Subscribe now for more stories of brotherhood, protection, and the kind of justice that goes viral when good people finally stop being silent. Also, check out the 2 videos showing on the screen right now, specially crafted for you.